Welcome to the Ground and Pone Podcast, a weekly show for combat sports fans, gaming fans, entertainment fans, and everything else. I'm Brian Shea, online content director at Game Informer, joined by Scott Fontana, the New York Post's MMA reporter. We are coming off 2 straight MMA heavy weeks thanks to UFC 274, so I figured we could start on the gaming side of things. Scott, we had a semi-busy week in the world of gaming, but nothing that immediately jumps off the page to me, so I figured I would throw it to you. Where would you like to start this week?
Well, very quickly, before we even get into this, I want to give a congratulations to you on the new title. I don't know if anybody picked up on that in the introduction there, but yeah, Brian has a new title at Game Informer.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. So I have spent the last year on the magazine side, and now I am jumping back over to the online side, which is where I kind of got my start. And I'm going to be running GameInformer.com from the editorial side. So that is very exciting, but it's also a lot of new responsibilities I'm still kind of getting adjusted to, but I have a lot of things that I want to implement, a lot of ideas, and we're going to see how it goes.
It's very exciting. I imagine for you, I'm excited for you, but yeah, I mean, let's dive into those games that you know a little bit about, right? I think what I'm most interested in as far as kind of current events is the fact that Starfield and Redfall were delayed going into next year. Now, obviously, these are 2 of the biggest games from Bethesda, right? Bethesda's putting these out, and yeah, we're not going to see them for another year at least.
Yeah, so we still don't know a whole lot. I think that was like indicator number 1. I think this is very smart that we're getting all of these, like, these games aren't coming out until next year, news drops, because next month when E3 typically happens, but this year it's going to be Summer Games Fest, that is typically like the hype epicenter, right? Like, it's going to be like, all right, this game's coming out and this game's coming out. People did not want to go to these events. Like, Microsoft and Bethesda have already announced their joint press conference during that week. And people don't want to go to that press conference expecting to see Starfield, which they thought was coming out November 11th. Maybe get a glimpse at gameplay, maybe get a glimpse at this, and then see a date drop that says 2023. Nobody wanted that. So they're getting that out of the way. They're ripping the Band-Aid off. I would assume we're still going to see these games come June. But for right now, they're just getting kind of like the bad news out of the way, so June can be all about the celebration. But I mean, this is not surprising. Like, sure. June was the final deadline for them to be like, this is still coming out in November, and here's what it looks like. Because so far, they have been so tight-lipped about both of these games, but Starfield's the one that I think most people are really excited about. That's the new game from Bethesda, which the Bethesda game studio proper, which is the one that makes Skyrim, the one that made most of the Fallout games. So this is like a new engine. It's taking place in space. Their first new IP in like this format in a long time, because like it's taking kind of like the Elder Scrolls and the Fallout formula and turning it into what essentially, I guess, a couple years ago they described to somebody as a Han Solo simulator.
Okay.
Sounds fun to me. If they can pull it off, if there's a new engine, like this is their first new engine in a long time as well. So like it's a game that a lot of people are excited about, myself included. But I think, like, you know, the proof's in the pudding with this, because like Fallout 4 kind of fell flat for a lot of people. Fallout
I really
76,
liked it, I should say. I
liked it
Fallout
too,
4.
but it's also like, thinking back, like as much as I liked it, I think I just liked the Fallout formula. I think that like too, looking at what was it, 2015? I think that came out. I remember
that sounds correct. Yeah, that was a busy year for big games, actually.
Yeah, it felt so antiquated to me, because like 2015 we got Witcher 3, we got Arkham Knight, we got Fallout 4,
and Phantom Pain as well. Metal Gear Solid.
That's right. Yeah, and Bloodborne as well.
That was also 2015 was a massive year for games.
And it's funny because at the time I remember thinking there's not a whole lot of like games that were like runaway game of the year winners, and then like Witcher 3 is like, in retrospect, I feel like that's the obvious choice. It's
the one that has, I think, the strongest legacy. Like, it didn't come and go. People still talk about it.
I'm telling you, 2017 and 2018 are my picks for the strongest years in recent memory.
I mean, I'm going to defer to you because I don't have it off the top of my head. But
right, let me rattle these off. Like, we're going to
hit right.
2017, we had Yakuza 0 finally come, like, kick in the door and be like, all right, like, this is like a big franchise now.
Sure.
We had Horizon Zero Dawn. Then a week later, we had the Nintendo Switch launch alongside Breath of the Wild. We had it like the next month, we had Nier Automata, which is a very much beloved game.
Sure, a lot of people love it.
Persona 5. And then
people like that one too, I heard.
That's one of my favorite RPGs of all time. Then we get a little bit later in the year and we get Super Mario Odyssey.
Yeah.
So that is like a murderer's row of
strong
games.
year.
And then 2018, it didn't have as many like huge games, but the big three were just massive. You had Red Dead Redemption 2, you had God of War, and you had Spider-Man.
God of War is obviously, for me, we've talked about this on the show already. I love it. I think it's phenomenal. And I think of those three, I think it's actually still the strongest. I'm obviously very biased here, but that's my opinion.
I believe that won our Game of the Year that year.
Rightfully so. Good job, Game Informer.
Spider-Man was my pick, I think, just because like I'm kind of biased in that regard, but like
bad job, Brian Shea.
I mean, that was my personal pick. I fully acknowledge that Red Dead 2 and God of War are absolutely incredible experiences. But yes.
Oh, yeah, Red Dead is phenomenal. That was very much like you can't go wrong kind of thing, but you're definitely going to go wrong because you didn't say, God of War.
But yeah, 2015 was a great year. But I would say 2017, 2018 are my picks for most recent great years. But looking at Starfield, speaking of great years, 2023 is looking more and more stacked by the month, with all these games that are like originally scheduled to come out this year getting pushed into 2023.
Sure.
We already have Breath of the Wild sequel. We already have Starfield. We have Redfall. And then also EA announced this week that Dead Space's remake is coming out in 2023 as well. So it's and that's on top of all the games they haven't even announced yet. Like, again, June is going to be the month of announcements. We're going to get so many games announced, so many release dates announced, so many first looks at gameplay. I'm probably going to get my hands on quite a few games. So it's like,
you tend to do that. That makes sense.
We're going to have so much gaming news come the month of June that I'm glad that like International Fight Week is in July. So we're going to have so much to talk about.
let me ask you though, because Starfield, you're kind of talking about it being a Han Solo simulator, right? And obviously, I'm familiar with the Fallout format. I've played Skyrim too. I've spent much less time with Skyrim than a lot of people have. I've played it, but I don't even know that I really. Not that anybody ever, I guess, completes it, but I don't even think I've completed the main quest. I mean, like, you did everything? You did what?
No, I didn't do everything. I completed like the main stuff back in the day. Okay. I've been meaning to go back and play it.
I have two different files started. I have one started on my PS4 and I have one started on my Switch, and I didn't get very far in either one. I guess I want to say I probably got like 15 hours into one of them, but that's like dropping the bucket kind of thing with that game, right? But yeah, back to my point, the format here, it's essentially like Fallout in space, right? Like that's maybe an oversimplification, but let's start from there, right? Outer Worlds came out a few years ago too. And I think I spent a lot of time in that. I played that game all the way through. That reminded me a lot of kind of what I imagined a Fallout in space would be like. And so that's kind of where I start. So what I kind of wonder about, and we don't know everything yet with Starfield, but I'm wondering how much different it's going to be for someone like me in terms of quality, because I thought Outer Worlds was very good.
Yeah, Outer Worlds was very well liked. But that kind of reminded me of like, this is like a smaller studio's take on the Fallout in space formula, and that it makes sense that it feels like Fallout in space, because Obsidian is the studio that did Fallout New Vegas,
which is also very well loved.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And but like they have so many projects on their plates at any given time. There's a game called Avowed that they announced a few years ago that looks like their take on Skyrim. Mm-hmm. So like they're kind of leaning into the fact that like, hey, we know how to do these games, and we're gonna do it. Or at least that's what the teaser makes it seem like. Is like that. It seems like their take on Skyrim or Elder Scrolls. But with Obsidian, like they really are the masters of that genre as well, because like they've worked closely with Bethesda. But here's the funny thing: they are both under the Microsoft umbrella now. Mm-hmm. So it's like, could we ever get a Fallout New Vegas 2 or like a new Fallout project from this studio? It's interesting to think about.
It is. And then it also makes me realize, not that I hadn't already realized this, but I would need an Xbox to play this, and I lack an Xbox.
Or a PC.
I mean, I've got a PC, but not one that could handle games.
Yeah. I mean, eventually you will. Like right now, they're keeping a lot of their games on multi-platform, but that's just in the meantime.
Yeah, I don't imagine that will stick. My hope is that, and I've kind of read a little bit about this, and maybe this is off base and that kind of thing, but people are speculating at the very least that there will come a time where you might be able to play, like Xbox Game Pass or something like that on PlayStation. we're not there
through the cloud.
Yeah, exactly. We're not close to that. It doesn't seem like it's around the corner, but it does seem like there's some industry thought, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe we will get to that point where both of these, whatever PlayStation's answer to that will be, if it's still PlayStation Plus or they come up with something different, could be, cross-platform essentially, because they're still happy to get your money either way.
That's the trick though, because like I don't think PlayStation would allow xCloud on their platform because they're so anti crossplay usually. Like
yes, they are.
But like, Xbox is putting their game, they're letting you play your games on your iPhone if you want. Like, like you can download the cloud app and play Gears of War or play Halo on your phone. And it's like they seem like they're just totally leaning into like, all right, we don't make our money on Xbox hardware. We make our money on like subscription services and software and bolstering our lineup. So like they've done like a complete flipping of the script of like what video game players who have played games as long as you and I have come to expect, where it's like, all right, I'm going to buy the system. I have to spend $60 a game. And then I have to like, when the sequel comes out, I'm going to have to buy that. And then buy memory cards if you're old enough to remember those. Like I remember
memory cards. Millennials
I went to PS2 when I bought my PS2. I got it with Tekken Tag Tournament, and I got home and I didn't have a memory card. Oof. And I didn't know I needed a memory card, and I was like, oh my god, I wasted my money because like I can't save my progress.
Yeah, so
I had to like wait like another week to like cut my neighbor's grass again and get like $40 and go buy a memory card.
Should have gone out again and be like, oh, sorry, I forgot to rake the leaves. Can you give me another $60?
But yeah, like Xbox has really like changed things up with how it really approaches like profitability and like kind of like the infrastructure by which we acquire our games. And I love that because like I never bought a copy of Gears 5, but I've played Gears 5. I didn't buy a copy of Halo Infinite, but I've played Halo Infinite. And that's great because like I just pay like this monthly subscription service. And also that allows me to discover other games that I wouldn't have otherwise discovered. Like there are so many indie games that I have just like wanted to check out. And then I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I want, like, can I drop like $15, $20 on this game that I'm not even sure I'm going to like? Like I'll talk to our reviewer and be like, hey, like, how is this? Like I'll ask them questions, but I'll still be like, oh man, another $15 here, $15 there. It adds up. So then I'll look and I'll be like, oh, it's on Game Pass, and I'll just download that version and check that out. And if I like it, and that's not the platform I want to play. Like sometimes there's games that just feel like I want to play that game on Switch. I want to have it on the go. I want to have it as like my playing game. And that is that's something that I'll check it out on Game Pass, and then I'll be like, okay, this is worth like my $10, $15, and I'll do that.
Sure. Yeah, I think one thing that I think of when I think of like Game Pass, it's like obviously it sounds fantastic for a lot of the reasons you just outlined, but then you hear, PlayStation obviously seems like they're trying to answer Game Pass with kind of the changes they've done in merging PlayStation Now with PlayStation Plus. We've talked about that on the show too. Those changes are coming down next month, but I think they're going to have problems ever really coming to the same page as Game Pass if they aren't going to offer kind of those day one games that we see on Game Pass. And they've already said, I mean, we saw this, I think it was last week, right? PlayStation was saying first party games would deteriorate, was their word, kind of if they launched on PlayStation Plus on day one. And that's the one thing that jumped out at me when I saw that is the fact that like you're now boxing yourself in. You can't ever do that without saying, no, we figured out a way where it's going to work, because you've already shut down the idea of it actually being a good idea for you.
Yeah. So basically they were talking during an earnings call with investors, and they're like saying like, hey, like somebody asked like, why is PlayStation Plus, if you're making like this big shift, we talked about this a couple episodes ago, PlayStation Plus is changing up its approach, and now it's offering like kind of like a Game Pass style subscription service and like different tiers where it's like get you backwards compatible like PlayStation titles and all this other stuff. Some, but it's like, all right, well, what about like the next big Xbox? Like how Xbox does theirs, like they'll have like, all right, Halo Infinite is on Game Pass day one, and same thing with Gears 5, same thing with Forza Horizon. And it's like, why isn't PlayStation doing that? Why can I pay all this money for this PlayStation Plus subscription, and when Gears of War whatever or Gears of War Ragnarok launches, God of War Ragnarok.
God of War Ragnarok.
You have to excuse us. We are recording this on a Monday morning. My brain has not yet warmed up. It does not operate on an SSD. It operates on an HDD.
Hates Mondays.
Yeah. So when God of War Ragnarok launches, it is not coming out on PlayStation Plus. And people are asking why. And I guess PlayStation is saying that, like, if they were to do it, they would not have the same level of quality that they've become known for, which, you know, hats off, all credit to PlayStation's first party studios. They have absolutely killed it the past couple of generations. Like, first party PlayStation games are just as high a quality as the industry offers. Like, again, Horizon, God of War, Last of Us, all of these are just like undeniably high quality games.
And I think if you really look at it, maybe it's not the driver in what turned the tide from, you know, Xbox 360 was really leading the market. And then the next generation, PS4 really did kind of take over. I have to think that at least that played a key role in getting it there, if not the primary one. It was definitely part of it, is the fact that it had so many strong first party games that, like, look, if you wanted to play God of War, you want to play these kind of things, you got to come over to our system. And they said, okay, we'll do that.
I mean, it was really starting, I would say the Uncharted series was really kind of like that first push towards that direction.
Yeah.
That seemed like, all right, we had like the Jack and Daxters, we had like the Crash Bandicoots at the time. And it's like, all these are like really good titles, but they weren't like, all right, this is why you own a PlayStation. Like, you owned a PlayStation because it had a DVD player, more than likely, when it was a PS2.
Yeah, PS2.
Like, there's a lot of good games on it, but like a lot of people bought it for the DVD player. That's why it's the number one selling console of all time. And it's going to be very tricky for any console to reach it, even though the Switch is getting there. The Switch is getting there. Switch has outsold the Wii at this point, which is wild.
That is very impressive. But on top of that, I think kind of the fact that they had the Blu-ray drive in PS3, whereas Xbox didn't. Now, granted, it didn't turn the tide here, but I know people. I knew adults that, like, they didn't play games. They bought a PlayStation because it was the cheapest Blu-ray player they could find at the time. So that got units into people's homes too.
Absolutely. And yeah, Uncharted was really like the first game that really made people be like, all right, I need a PlayStation so I can play this game. Because, like, it was really Uncharted 2. Uncharted 1 was like a good tech demo, I think. But, like, they were still figuring out some game design things with that game. Uncharted 2 was like, all right, this is like, you're playing an Indiana Jones movie, basically. And that was really the start of that. And then I think that the PlayStation 3, a lot of people forget, the PS3, its swan song was The Last of Us. The fact that ran on a PS3 is wild to me, because that is a great looking game.
Same studio as Uncharted, by the way.
Yep. So it's like, oh my God, like the parting shot that the PlayStation 3 left us with was The Last of Us. And then, of course, we got The Last of Us remastered on PS4, which looked incredible as well. And then that carried us all the way through to where we are today, where we just have like hit after hit from the PlayStation's internal studios.
Can I tell you, I've never actually played The Last of Us, not even the first one.
That is wild to me, because you are like the biggest PlayStation fan I know.
I am. You know what it is? It's kind of twofold, right? Well, number one, I'm not a huge zombies guy, right? So that's like base level. It's like, I know it has to do with some form of zombie-ish type of thing. So like after that, I'm just like, I don't know. And I really do appreciate the studio. Naughty Dog, right? I love Naughty Dog. I love what they do. They create amazing games. I had no doubt that it was an amazing game. It was just, for whatever reason, the subject matter, I just can't get over there. Number two, I've already been told how the story ends. So I have that. So if I was to go back and play it, like, there's not going to be that necessarily surprise. I even kind of understand. It's more like, I understand the experience of it down there too. So I would play it. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I could go back and play it one day still. I think I have access to it through something. I'm pretty sure it's on like the PlayStation Plus curated collection that you get with PS5. What is it called? The Essential PS4 Essentials or something like that. Yeah. It's along those lines. Either way, I can get it if I want to. It's easy. I don't know. I just, for whatever reason, it wasn't really my kind of thing.
Do you think that the PlayStation executive who said this, the name is escaping me, I think Totoki, do you think that he is accurate in like saying that the quality would drop on a PlayStation first party title if they made it available to people who subscribe to this platform?
I think it would really just require them to adjust when the day one is ready. That's what it really ought to come down to. I mean, if you put out a game, you can control when that game comes out. If you think that the quality isn't there, wait. It's not that big. Like, I think gamers have become much more accustomed to the idea of waiting because we want the quality to be there. We've been burned way too many times dropping 60. Now it's going to be $70 on games that aren't really as day one ready as they ought to be. So if you're telling me that the quality is going to suffer, but you know that I'm willing to wait, it's on you to just push the date back and then have it ready for day one.
I think that their concern seems to be from a profitability standpoint. They're like, oh, if we're not making $60 a pop for these,
that's the deterioration.
I think so. I think like maybe the first few wouldn't deteriorate, but then when those returns come back and they're not making the $60 for every single copy sold, that's when they start being like, all right, well, we can't keep up this level of quality because our budgets are starting to decline and all that stuff.
But why is Xbox able to do that? That's the question I have.
Well, I think that the other point is that, I mean, I don't know if they're making this point because they said they refuse to like comment on a competitor's strategy.
Fine.
However, I think a lot of people are saying that like a giant company behind Xbox like Microsoft is able to help them eat those costs in order to gain a larger market share.
And yeah, granted, Microsoft is a bigger company than Sony, but it's not like we're not talking about a mom and pop shop with Sony.
True.
My Very goodness, true. They're still a massive company too. I mean, they've got film, they've got my TV's a Sony, you know, they have funds available. They can make up that revenue somewhere else if they're not getting it off of first party games. What part of their revenue is first party games? Seriously.
Yeah, I have no idea.
So I would have to think they could find a way to do it off the back end. Look, if they want to put Microsoft on the back burner, if they want to really pull away, this is a way to do it. Like you might have to pony up a little bit, but in the long run, I would think it would help them.
Well, that's the thing is like it's Microsoft's attempt here or their goal here is to grab a bigger piece of the pie.
Sure.
Sony already has the most pie, at least in terms of this 1v1 comparison. Like
right.
Switch is quietly winning this generation, I would say.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, but Microsoft and Sony battling it out in like the clash of the powerhouse titans in terms of like the two comparable consoles. Like, all right,
Nintendo does its own thing.
Nintendo going to beat its own drum.
Yeah,
but like in terms of that, PlayStation already has the lead, so it's like I don't think they feel the urgency that Microsoft does, and like kind of like that chip on their shoulder of like we got to make waves, we've got to get a bigger piece of the pie basically. And like I hope that it doesn't come back and bite PlayStation, but at the same time, like it's cool to see these divergent approaches and see how they pan out for these companies.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting from a kind of a passive observer standpoint, and you obviously you work in the industry, so you're interested in that type of thing. But like me as a gamer, like I just want the best options that I can have available. And look, if Sony is, it feels like they're playing prevent defense, right? You're talking about, okay, we just want to stick with what works, right? We're just going to keep you at bay. Hopefully, if we feel like we have the lead, but prevent defense doesn't always keep the lead. I mean, we've seen this so many times. We're talking about football here. I don't know how many people are crossover football fans from gaming and fighting. But Brian's a Ravens fan. I'm a Panthers fan. So we know football enough, and football prevent defense. We're talking about them saying, okay, maybe we'll give you a little bit of room to kind of move, but we just don't want you to get.
It's a bend not break mentality.
Bend not break, exactly. Thank you.
And it pisses me off every single time because it'll be like, all right, we've got like a 7-point lead. We got to stop them from scoring a touchdown. And then they continue to give like 10-yard chunk after 10-yard chunk. And it's like, what are you guys doing? It's the most stressful thing ever.
It's like built to keep it competitive. And that's almost what seems like the way, honestly, we've seen this before in games. I feel like this in the gaming industry, this feels like something that everybody ends up doing. They're not trying to, not that, look, I don't want them to put Xbox out of business. I don't think that's good for gamers. I don't think that's good for the business. I don't think it's good for anybody. But
we've seen what happens when Madden doesn't have any competition.
Sure. And most definitely. And even FIFA, which we can get to in just a minute. I have some opinions on that too, at least. But no, I would think you'd still want to put the quality product out there, the most quality product you can. And I don't think it's going to put Xbox out of business. Xbox certainly, they have the funding. Microsoft's not going anywhere unless it's making no money. And they're not
proven to be very profitable for Microsoft.
I think at this point we're pretty much in a world where Sony and Microsoft are going to have a home gaming console for as long as they feel like it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it would take a catastrophe for one of them to drop off. Like it would take like PlayStation 6 or whatever the next Xbox is called to just be an unmitigated disaster for people to just abandon them completely. Like it would have to be just something horrific,
or some sort of merger or something like that, which I imagine still the some of the monopolistic Overwatchers would probably be like, I don't know about that. We'll have to look.
Yeah, they're already eyeing the Activision acquisition by Microsoft. Sure. Like if
rightfully
Microsoft
so.
made a play for PlayStation. Like,
yeah.
Goodness gracious, that would be the end of times for the games industry and the monopoly folks.
Right. But again, I brought up FIFA, and I kind of wanted to ask you about this too, because there's the whole thing with the FIFA video game, of course, right? We're not talking soccer, we're talking about the game, which honestly, when you talk about FIFA with a lot of people, they are thinking the game first. I'm sure there's soccer fans who would think that first, but I imagine, football fans would probably be thinking of, La Liga or the Premier League. That when you say that, that's what you're thinking first. They're probably not thinking about FIFA. You're talking about the World Cup too. I mean, no one's saying the FIFA World Cup. They know what they mean. So the news, of course, is why don't you set it up, Mr. Game, sir?
Yeah. So EA Sports announced that FIFA 23 will be the last game with the FIFA name on it, and basically, this is a long-running partnership that EA Sports has had with the FIFA brand. And it's become synonymous like with the how like, we call whenever there's a football game coming out, we call it Madden, because it's like, all right, Madden's coming out this year. And that like,
because it's literally the only game that matters.
Yeah. People know about it. Like, all right, Madden's coming out. We got FIFA coming out. We got 2K coming out. That's not EA Sports, but still it's like synonymous with like the new basketball game, the new soccer game, the new football game is coming out. You just say, all right, FIFA comes out next week. Madden comes out next week. And you've seen it where like every time an athlete is interviewed. When I interviewed Fabricio Verdum, I asked him what he plays, and he's like, "Oh man, FIFA's my favorite." And it's like, yeah, so many UFC athletes play FIFA, and we
especially internationally.
Like, it's the biggest selling game that EA Sports creates by a long shot. Worldwide, yeah. Like Madden it sells very high, but like you look at the international market, like FIFA blows it out of the water.
Sure. I want to say, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, I do think Madden actually is, at least of the sports games, I'm pretty sure Madden does rule like North America.
That would make sense, but like FIFA sells a shocking amount of copies in North America as well.
I know it does. It's up there for sure.
I don't know which one sells more specifically targeted to the North American market, but FIFA definitely sells the most internationally.
But so why is it in the news then?
So EA announced that FIFA 23 is going to be the last one with the FIFA name, and they're splitting off their partnership and like the licensing. And the reason for that is a mix of, the reason that it's been put out there has been like creative differences and like kind of like feeling creatively stifled. But there's also a piece of the puzzle there that a lot of people are theorizing that EA just doesn't see the value in having the FIFA name in its game name, because it from what I'm seeing, like for 4 years, they wanted like $1 billion to have the FIFA name just on the game. And then they also, the report that I'm seeing
FIFA wanted $1 billion.
FIFA wanted $1 billion to have like the FIFA name for 4 years. And from what I'm seeing is like FIFA was very, very controlling over what EA Sports could and couldn't do with the games. Mm-hmm. So like that would explain a lot of like the the lack of progression year over year, lack of iteration in the games. Like I'm wondering how much of that like is also the case with Madden. Like
it could make some sense.
Madden, I mean,
speculating here, but
the NFL is traditionally very controlling over its image and everything, because like look at Playmakers on ESPN, if you remember that show.
Mm-hmm. I think we've talked about it on this show.
I don't know if we've talked about it on this show, like, or if we talked about it on one of our preview shows.
That's right,
that didn't ever air. Yeah. But basically, like for people who aren't aware, ESPN put out a drama called Playmakers
like 20 years ago.
Yeah, literally 20 years ago. This is shortly after they got the NFL license as well. I think it was for like Monday Night Football or something. They got like the license. And ESPN had this Playmakers show that was like all about like kind of like the seedy underbelly of professional
football. The dark side of pro football.
It never said like NFL. It was like its own independent league, but it was very obvious. This is the number one professional football league in the country.
It was like Any Given Sunday, that movie.
Yeah, where it's like an off-brand NFL. It's a world where the NFL doesn't exist, but this league exists.
Yeah.
But you had like drug addicts, you had steroid users, you had domestic abusers. Like it was just shining like a very,
you had the
very
way people within the team would kind of respond if they had a gay teammate.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that story. Yeah, it shined a very negative light on the world of professional football and NFL.
Not that it's negative to be gay in football, but it was kind of like how the team would treat it.
Yeah, exactly. It was the teammates' response to the news that they had a gay teammate, and then they had, but it shined a very negative light on like what it's like to be in the world of professional football. Like again, you had abusers, you had homophobes, you had steroid users, and you had drug addicts, and the NFL threatened to pull their license if ESPN didn't cancel this show that was very critically acclaimed, rated very well, and had a lot of fans of the show. And wouldn't you know it, ESPN caved and canceled it.
And look, I get it. I get why they're going to do it. What is that doing for them if they have this show? It's not really doing it. It's not what's going to drive people to come to ESPN. But ESPN at the time was that was their first foray into trying scripted drama. And
they learned a harsh lesson.
Tilt came next, I think. That was the poker show.
Oh God!
You remember Tilt? I didn't watch it.
I think they probably said like, we could afford to lose the World Series of Poker license.
I think it was probably in development already, to be fair. And it was at a time where poker really was growing. So I'm sure poker was pretty like, yeah, man, whatever, just get it out there. That's fine.
I mean, could you imagine? Like, I think that poker probably had a similar attitude as the UFC did at that point, where they were like, they were growing our market share, similar to Xbox, and they're like, could you imagine? Have you ever seen Kingdom?
Me? No, I haven't watched that. Honestly, I really should, and I should make sure we when I do that, we should definitely go.
Dude, I love that show. Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff that like is not super flattering of the sport on there. Like, and they directly reference the UFC on there. Like they reference specific coaches, specific athletes on there. Like they reference John Jones. They reference Greg Jackson on that show. Like Greg Jackson actually is referenced quite a bit on that show.
Okay.
And Matt Hughes is in the show some. So it's like there's they exist in a world where the UFC actually exists. But like if ESPN had a show like Kingdom, I don't think the UFC would give a crap. I think the UFC would be like, this is awesome. Like the sport of MMA is taking up more of like a mind share, and like that's going to ultimately turn more fans towards us.
How could a scripted show produce any worse behavior or worse headlines than what we already get literally every single week? I mean, just over the weekend, you had in the corner of Andrea Lee, her coach, and my understanding is also boyfriend Tony Kelly, who's an active UFC fighter as well, is talking about how she's got to kind of get rid of this or she's got to take it to this and I'm using his words, dirty Brazilian.
Oh boy!
Oh, you didn't see this?
I missed that fight.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Apparently she did something that was perceived as dirty in the corner's eyes, and he's talking about this effing dirty Brazilian, right?
Oh,
and everybody swiftly condemned it on social media and everything like that. Then you get later on in the evening, Kelly puts out something on Twitter saying cancel culture and all that stuff. It's like, guy, no one's saying lose your job either. I mean, maybe there were, but like realistically, most people are just like, yo, this is yuck. Don't say this, guy. It's not okay. So everyone here is just exercising their freedom of speech. Nobody's calling for anybody to lose their jobs or cancel you,
Yeah. Andrea Lee, she's also the one that had the husband that had the swastikas tattooed, right?
Yep. And I believe she got out of that relationship because it was abusive or something like that. And you'd have to look into that yourself. I'm not trying to authoritatively speak on that because I don't want to spread any sort of, misallegations, that kind of thing. But having said that, it certainly looked like she's got a type.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's rough. That's rough.
Birds of a feather,
But I missed most of the prelims. I'm not gonna lie. I'm upset that I missed the Tatsuro Taira fight.
Yeah.
Because he just seems like a really great prospect. Oh man, I'm catching up on the results live right now.
We got to finish up we got to get back to the EA conversation.
That's right.
Too. So you had a theory.
You had a theory. You said you had some thoughts.
I do have some thoughts. So it just seems to me that like the fallout here is that realistically, because now EA is going to stick with their soccer game, and that FIFA is going to make their own game, right? That's my understanding.
Well, we see how well that goes if they if a league tries to make their own internal product. Look at RBI Baseball.
Oh
what a
my
great
God.
game that is.
Exactly. This is exactly
Stack
where
of garbage. And they finally canceled it. So here's what happened with RBI Baseball. Sony wanted to renew the MLB The Show license a couple years ago, and MLB said, "We love the work you're doing." This is paraphrasing, obviously, but we want it to be multi-platform. And that seems like it was a sticking point for MLB, where they were like, "Look, we're really happy with the work you guys are doing." MLB is a consistently really great product every single year. It's one of the few annualized sports games that puts out a solid product year in, year out.
I mean, yeah, but I could even poke holes in that. It's starting to head more in the direction of FIFA and Madden to me for a little bit. I think it's iterating a little too much.
It's iterating, but it's still a solid product.
Yeah. Whereas, yeah. I mean, it's not declining in quality. It's just, it feels much more and more every year like it really is kind of the updated roster.
That's fair. However, still great product. Whereas Madden last year was like full of glitches.
Yes.
You can't say that usually about MLB.
That is true. They have much fewer incidents of these type of game breaking type of glitches, or maybe not even game breaking. They're just laughable. Like the way Madden, literally every August, you're going to find someone put out videos or a bunch of few videos out there of something goofy happening in Madden. You're like, what the hell's going on, guys? Come on. You couldn't get that out of QA.
But basically MLB goes, we love the product. We want to do multi-platform. And Sony doesn't make games for Xbox. Sony doesn't make games for Switch, but they did for MLB, because MLB The Show is a very well-liked product and they wanted to keep making it. So they agreed to put the game out on multi-platform.
Smart.
And I think that game coming out to multi-platform, because MLB has long wanted a game on Xbox. They've long wanted a game on Switch. And that's why they internally created RBI Baseball. And the first year, I think a lot of people excused it. So like, all right, it's like their first year. They're building something new. Like, look at EA Sports UFC 1.
Yeah.
EA Sports UFC 1. It was like very bare bones. It was just like, hey, let's get the combat down, and then we'll expand from there. Then 2, 3, and 4 really built on top of that, to varying degrees of success, depending on your view of that franchise. But they have built on top of it. But that first year was very bare bones in terms of the feature set. Mm-hmm. That's what everybody thought was happening with RBI Baseball. Then eventually RBI Baseball added a couple things, like there's season mode, there's franchise mode, but it never
base
got
level stuff
any better. And so I think that once the MLB had this opportunity to renew with Sony, they were like, we want to go multi-platform. Sony agreed to it. They pretty much immediately killed the RBI Baseball franchise, because they're like, well, what's the point?
Who was buying it? I mean,
exactly.
After you played it after a few years, it was such a very simple experience as far as baseball too. And along the way, you saw MLB The Show add a retro mode, which felt very similar yet distinctly better than what you were getting in RBI Baseball. Now, it's most similar to the old Ken Griffey Jr. Super Nintendo game.
They even have Ken Griffey Jr. talking on it.
They do indeed. I love it. What a play!
I love it. But I was one of the first people to play that game, that mode outside of Sony.
Yeah,
we used to every single year we would have Sony Santa Monica send out a couple of representatives. Or Sony San Diego, I'm sorry.
Yes.
That send out a couple of representatives to Game Informer, and they would bring the latest build of MLB The Show, and we would play it. We'd do videos and stuff like that. And I remember retro mode was like a thing that our guy opened up, and he's like, "Hey, check this retro mode out." Because I think the year prior, or 2 years prior, I was like, "Man, I really miss the old triple play games, like back in the day, like Sega Genesis era." Like Super Nintendo era, like those types of triple play, Ken Griffey Jr. And then he knew
I don't know if triple play was on that generation of consoles. They came along. I want to say it was PlayStation 1.
Nope, triple play gold was on Sega Genesis. That's my favorite baseball game of all time.
Wow, interesting. Mine's Ken Griffey Jr. presents Major League Baseball.
Yeah, that was a great one too. I liked I think Winning Run. Was that the one that it was either Winning Run
the sequel.
Or the one on N64? There were two on N64. It was Major League Baseball featuring Ken Griffey Jr. and Ken Griffey Jr.'s Winning Run.
I thought Winning Run. I mean, we're sitting here debating a game when it came out, but that's kind of neither here nor there, right?
But yeah, there were two games on N64, one game on SNES, and but yeah, I remember when our guy brought that out, I was just like, this is exactly what I'm wanting. And now and originally it was just single game only for that retro mode. And now you can do franchise mode in retro mode, and I haven't done it, but I'm like, oh, that sounds so enticing.
So essentially, but to get back to kind of FIFA here, you're worried that it's going to go down the path of RBI baseball, where they're going to try and make their own game,
unless they license it out, like unless they can find a suitor like that's like a legit, like maybe they go over to Konami, they have their eFootball series.
But it used to be called Pro Evolution Soccer, right? And
now they just shed that license because they wanted to have more creative freedom. So I can't imagine them signing on with FIFA.
Yeah,
so it's like they need to find somebody who
Konami's in.
They need to find like somebody who's like an experienced soccer developer, and if they want to really like
who is that
quality product. Exactly, it's like Konami or EA Sports. That's it.
The only soccer developer I'm thinking of is at this point now it's Nintendo, right?
Oh my god,
they got their own game.
Yeah, they have Mario Strikers Battle League coming out, which is another game that just got a trailer this week, and it looks like so much fun. I haven't played like a soccer video game in so long. But Mario Strikers Battle League looks like a blast. It's like they put out a gameplay overview, and like it's not even like, it's so different from the game of soccer. They call it Strike. They don't even call it soccer. Like, you know, there's like Mario Baseball. They call it baseball. There's Mario Tennis, Mario Golf. They all call those sports, even though they all take liberties. This is like, there's power-ups Mario Kart style where like you can throw shells at like your teammates or your enemies. Then you can also do like, there's a tackle mode or tackle move you can do. If you do it on the enemy, it takes them out as you would expect. If you do it on your teammate, it gives them a speed boost. Like you want to like tackle them from behind and it bumps them forward. Like it like almost gives them like a boost. And it looks like so much fun. And then there's a league where you can join an online league. And like, I think it's like 4 or 5 players on a team, but your team that you join is 20 human players. So all you have to do is make sure 5 people are able to play from your team, but you just pull from your team of 20 people that are online, and then you can join this league and play Mario Strikers against other people. It's so much fun. The captain can like customize the stadium. They can customize the colors of the team. They can customize the logo and all that stuff. So like, they're doing some cool stuff with this game, and I'm excited for that. Like, so speaking of soccer video games, like that.
Right. So now obviously EA and FIFA, whatever their game ends up being, they're going to have at least some way a competition, even though it's not soccer, like for all the reasons you're saying. But on the surface, people will still be able to look at this as a very similar soccer game. It's in the same, let's say the same subgenre. I feel like it's fair, right? But either way, I mean, yeah, God. Are people really going to follow a FIFA? Because they think they could just call their game FIFA and they can start trying to maybe steal away people just by confusing it, right?
Yeah.
Are they going to have, I mean, they've got marketing power, but like, do they have what EA does and in the gaming space and the experience in the gaming space there? That's a question too. So
they'd be non-endemic, right? Like, so they would have to come from as an outsider to advertise, or they'd have to hire an agency or something that has endemic outlets and communications with people. Like, there are so many advertising and marketing agencies and PR agencies in the gaming space that like EA even uses agencies. Like they use they use a couple different agencies to get their word out, but they also have an internal PR team. Yeah. So like, there's a lot of ways that EA or FIFA, if they do decide to go that route, they could get those ins, at least with press and with content creators.
And that's really who drives, what people are reading, what people are learning about is the media there. I think in gaming media is very critical in getting the word out. I think a lot of people, except for when they do, Nintendo Direct or these other kind of direct to consumer video launches they do and that kind of thing. But even still, everything is still driven through, magazines and online magazines such as Game Informer.
I appreciate you saying that.
It really does. No, seriously though, it drives what people are talking about and learning about. So if they can still if EA, which they can, get the word out on what their game is and what it's all about, people will learn about it. They will. Yeah.
And I think that if there's a quality product, people will play it, but I just don't see it being a quality product unless they get a really good developer behind it.
Especially not right away. That first one's going to have, like, you're going to have to accept that first one, it's not going to be game of the year quality. It's not going to be sports game of the year quality. They're going to put a game out and you're going to hope that maybe there's something to it. I would be interested to see what EA ends up doing though with they call it EAFC,
EA Sports FC.
Yeah.
That's what I think the way forward for sports games is you start off as a bare bones product and then add to it over a couple of years, like the platform approach. I think that like if you're going to be a new player in the sports games space. I think that's the way to go about it, is do a platform approach, live service.
So I just laughed before, and the reason being because it's EA Sports FC, right?
Mm-hmm.
They also have EA Sports UFC.
Yeah.
Oh my God. The game is the same except for one letter. They're really doing that? Come on. They need. I really would like to see them come up with more creative titles. Like, I liked how, like, look, NBA Live is not the market leader when it comes to basketball games anymore.
It could be though, because NBA 2K has pissed off so many fans with all of its dumb microtransactions and everything. And it's a $70 game now, and they're charging it like it's a free to play game.
Oh, I know.
It is the most annoying. I used to love NBA 2K.
I've been very alienated by it. Yeah.
I can't even like bring myself to play it anymore because it's like there's ads galore. They're constantly enticing you to drop extra money on virtual currency and everything. And like there's sponsored characters, like Jake from State Farm was a character in this year's game, and you could
he was? Oh man, now we're gonna go get it.
You complete a challenge to get the Jake from State Farm outfit for your character. It's like, get out of here. Like, it's the worst.
It really
I'm sorry,
is.
you were making a point. NBA Live is not a market leader.
No, but at least they have a different name. NBA 2K, another good example. They have a different name. I mean, it's 2K, everything is 2K, but like it's still got its kind of its own identity, right? You're just saying EA Sports and then what the product is. Like it's such a boring name. You can't come up with like something cool. Like, I think the FC idea is pretty cool. And EAFC, honestly, actually would be okay. But I think I'm probably more mad that it's EA Sports UFC, that's all they could come up with.
Well, they seem like they're rebranding all of their titles to be EA Sports whatever. Because like there's also EA Sports PGA Tour is coming out.
Yeah.
I think they might be getting away from having like the naming partners, because I think they're seeing that EA Sports is also a very powerful name. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few years we lose Madden.
Oh, that would not go over well. I don't
know if they just said, hey, like we're now EA Sports NFL.
Yeah.
I don't think people would hate that. Like, I mean, it's different because Madden is such a beloved figure.
Yeah.
And
that's the problem.
Like,
that's the big problem is he's an individual that people like have, at least over time, built some form of a relationship. Even the people who literally are too young to have watched him do his work as a commentator or be familiar with him as a coach, they don't know where the heck the name Madden even came from. Mm-hmm. I think that people are going to be too kind of accustomed to that. It's going to take, you're going to have a lot of people like you and me who are going to be like, wow, this is terrible. And I think ultimately they don't have enough goodwill built up, Madden, to get away with it right now. Like, you better start putting out some better games.
I mean, if they frame it the way they did with EA Sports FC, like here's what they said. This new independent platform will bring a fresh opportunity to innovate, create, and evolve. This is much more than just a change of symbol. As EA Sports, we're committed to ensuring EA Sports FC is a symbol of change. We're dedicated to meaningfully reinvesting in the sport, and we're excited to work with a large and increasing number of partners to expand to new authentic experiences that yada, yada, yada.
Yeah,
but like,
yeah.
They are saying like this is going to be like a new era for their soccer game. And like, if they can actually deliver on that, I think that a change away from the Madden name, maybe even away from the NFL name, would be welcome.
I'm going to stop you there. I actually strongly disagree with this one. And the reason being, in soccer, at the very least, they can still go to La Liga, EPL, all of these Serie A, right? The Italian league. I'm still learning my Italian. I'm getting there, but you can go to those leagues. You can work with them. You can get those leagues as long as you have them in place. You're still going to be able to get the authentic experience. But you take away the NFL,
that's fair,
from football. I mean, who's going to play? I know a lot of people who, when I try to recommend, like, let's say baseball is a good example. MLB The Show, right? MLB The Show is what it is. It's got the MLB license. It's the authentic experience. There's a game, and I don't know if you've played this, but Super Mega Baseball. Have you ever played that series?
Yep.
Okay. I am a monster fan of this series. I became a fan a couple years ago when I did some work with Den of Geek, and I found it, and I just loved it. I loved the charm to it. It
delivers that retro experience that we were talking about earlier.
It does, but it does it in a way that's not like cheap and cheesy. Like it's fun. They actually have like a pretty deep franchise mode now. They're up to Super Mega Baseball 3. That's the one that I've been playing.
Very to buy that one. I played the first two.
Oh, you should. We could play it. It's so much fun. You can even co-op play. which is really cool. Yeah.
There's co-op in MLB The Show this year.
I know there is. I feel like there was a response to what they were actually at least seeing the idea in proof of concept in Super Mega Baseball. You have to think that because that was there, maybe they said, okay, this could be something we could do. But Super Mega Baseball does not have obviously the real teams. You can make all the logos. I actually I was out of work for a little while, and I had a hobby where I went and made every single team logo.
I've done that in the past.
Yeah.
Like, I forget which game it was. Oh, it was Tony La Russa Baseball 2 on like DOS back in the day.
Gosh.
Like they had the MLB license, but they had all kinds of they had like an all-time team for every single team. So it was like you go to the Yankees and it was just like Babe Ruth was on this team, and so was I don't know, whoever like it was like Don Mattingly and Babe Ruth were both on the team. And it's like, all right, well, like they're just like picking and choosing like what players they want to put on, because they had like the entire MLB PA and Hall of Fame license.
Interesting.
So it was like really interesting, but like I wanted to have like the current roster. So I would go through and modify every single player in the game to match the team's current rosters.
Sure. And you can do that, but you can also they have a logo creator in this one too, right? So like I went and I made all the authentic uniforms. I made the authentic logos, like as best you can, because they kind of give you some graphics that like are very similar, but not quite the same. Like there's some sort of like mean looking swordfish that you can use for the Marlins, and you can kind of, so I would do that kind of thing. I'll have to show you that too at some point.
Dude, I used to do that remember going back to our Playmakers talk about how ESPN got rid of that because NFL, this was just before Madden signed the exclusivity deal with the NFL.
Right.
And the NFL Blitz series at the time, which was then owned by Midway.
Yeah.
So Midway owned the NFL Blitz franchise at that time. Now EA Sports owns it, but Midway owned it at the time. And they were like, oh, we want to keep making a football game. And we saw how little the NFL cared for a series like Playmakers. So what we're going to do is we're going to put out a Blitz game that doesn't have the NFL license, and it's going to be called Blitz the League. It's going to have like players who are seen by many as dirty players, like Lawrence Taylor on the cover. And the story is going to be basically Playmakers, but adapted to a video game. So like there were players who were like intentionally injuring other players. There were players who were like, if your player got injured, you could like shoot them up with like cortisone.
Right, yeah, it was like roids and things.
Yeah, like there was like ways to like get that, and like they'd go into like roid rage, and it's like, oh my god. So that's the one that I actually also went through and created the entire NFL in there, because you could edit all of your teams 100%.
Sure. But again, back to kind of the idea of Super Mega Baseball. I would recommend this game to people. I'm telling you, like, it's good. It's really gonna have fun, and big baseball fans I know who would actually and gamers who would play it. I'm like, well, do they have the real players? I'm like, well, no. I'm like, can I play as the Yankees? They're like, no. I'm like, I don't really care. So that's it. Base level, they really just want the real stuff.
Here's something I forgot. EA Sports owns that development studio now.
Which development studio?
Super Mega Baseball's Metalhead Software. EA Sports bought that studio. I forgot about that.
They did. Yes, absolutely.
I just went on Steam to be like, oh yeah, I should check out Super Mega Baseball 3. And it's funny, they just gave like in the trailer,
since the release of SMB3. Yeah.
So they recognized how good the game is, and they bought it. They're like, well, we don't have a baseball franchise right now. Mm-hmm. So they bought Super, because it's weird to like see Metalhead Software as the developer and publisher, Electronic Arts. Yeah. But it's funny because the swordfish is actually the example they use when they're showing like how you can make your team.
Okay.
But that's the reason I didn't buy it, actually. Super Mega Baseball 3, it's $45. That's a tough pill to swallow for a game of that scope, and like when you can drop 60 for MLB.
I get it. But you know what? The quality is there is the thing. That's the one thing that I can like assure you as someone who's played the game like a lot, is that the quality is there. It's not a simulation experience. It's not really an arcade experience either. It's like kind of somewhere in the middle.
Almost like Ken Griffey Jr. on SNES, where it was like that was not fully arcade, but it was also like far from simulation.
Yeah, it's a little similar to that, but it's not like dumbed down. There really is some challenge to it. You can manually change the degree of difficulty, like from like dead easy to oppressively hard. You can truly customize it, and it's for batting, for pitching, fielding, running the bases. You can change the degree of difficulty from anywhere from I think 0 to 99 for each one if you want to. So you can truly customize the difficulty there. If you want a challenge, you can get it in this game, and it's actually pretty cool.
Scott, I need to ask you this before we move on from gaming, because we're coming up
on
the
hour
mark. We do have
some fighting stuff we got to get into. Yeah, but what do you want to say?
How are you finding Cyberpunk 2077?
Oh yeah, that's right. Because I've been playing that just a little bit. I'm still not that deep into it, but I'm interested in the world. The world's kind of building itself out, fleshing itself out for me right now. I would say I'm still only a couple hours in, so I haven't met. I know Keanu Reeves has a character in this game, and I
haven't met him yet. Oh my god, you were very early.
I said I'm very early, exactly. So, but I'm intrigued. I'm liking what it is. They're still introducing systems at this point. So, okay. Yeah, I think probably the reason why I didn't get to play that much last week was because I went to the movies twice.
Oh, what'd you see?
Yeah, well, the first night I went by myself because everybody was asleep, and I had an off night. And I said, "What am I going to do?" I said, "Okay, let's go to the movies." And I saw the Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. The one with
I want to see that.
It's fun. It's a good time. It's everything it promises to be, and really nothing more. But it's fun. You have a good time with it. It's like an hour 45. And I was between that and the Northman were the two that I put up like a little poll. I'm like, someone help me out. What do I want to see? Right. And ultimately I wanted to laugh. So I kind of just went with that. And it was a little shorter too, which made it easier. The other one though, the day later, my wife and I planned a date night. So we went out. My parents came and watched the kids. So we went to see Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Well, Scott, I mentioned last week that the COVID's done got me.
The COVID done got him.
So I had to cancel my opening night ticket for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. But this past weekend, I crossed the threshold in which I could re-enter society. So I went and saw Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness as well.
All right. So we're not going to do spoilers. We don't do that on our show without warning. As we've talked about, next week is the week we're going to do a spoiler.
No.
Discussion.
I'm going to say we give people an extra week.
Still going to give them an extra week. Okay.
Yeah, I say we give them the extra week for Halo.
All right. That's fine. We can do that.
We'll figure it out.
Well, maybe we will. Maybe we won't. We'll see how we feel. We'll warn you no matter what. You're not gonna. No one's gonna spoil anything for you without that's how we do things. But anyway, so non-spoiler discussion. Yeah. Real quick, I guess, because we do want to get to the fights here. What did you think of Doctor Strange?
So I went into it with a lot of expectations.
Okay.
Because, this, I guess some minor spoilers here for past movies and past projects.
Okay.
This seems like it was
a superhero. Sorry.
It was going to be a culmination of like the climax of what the events that occurred in WandaVision and the events that occurred in Spider-Man No Way Home.
That's essentially that's your setup is like, if you want to go into this movie to be prepared, you probably should have watched at least those.
Those kind of WandaVision kind of toyed with the concept of multiverses, and Spider-Man No Way Home fully started embracing it.
Yes.
But this promised kind of to be like the culmination of those, like almost like how like an Avengers movie pays off all the solo movies that happened during that phase
to some degree. Yeah.
Like I actually started a MCU rewatch last night.
Okay.
So I'm three movies in. We're doing chronological. So we did Captain America, Captain Marvel, and then Iron Man 1. And then we but yeah, so that this almost promised to be the culminating movie, the culminating project of those three films, or those three projects, I guess you should call them. WandaVision, No Way Home, and then Multiverse of Madness. I guess you could say Loki kind of like started to kind of play. I mean, Loki was all about multiverses as well, if you haven't seen that show. But I think that I was a little... I'm trying to think of the best way to put this without spoiling. I was a little let down by the scope in which it did things, and I was a little let down by not really the handling of certain characters, but really kind of like the one note version of certain characters. Like it almost felt like a particular character was not, they were handled well, but they were not handled with depth.
Okay.
But other than that, I really enjoyed it.
I think I know who you mean. Yeah.
I think near the end of the movie, it became the most Sam Raimi ass movie I've ever seen in my life. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
There are some elements where I'm like, oh my God, this is like so campy. And I'm kind of liking it, but also kind of like it feels like jarring to like the rest of the MCU.
Yeah, in the context of the MCU, it felt a little weird.
But yeah, overall, positive on the movie. I love the horror elements. I love the Easter eggs and the cameos that they had on some of these. And like they've teased some of them in the trailers, so I don't think that's a spoiler to say there are cameos.
It's also MCU. I think we expected at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also a multiverse movie. But yeah, they do a lot of really cool stuff in this movie. I would say more hits than misses, but there are definitely a few misses along the way.
Let me ask you this too, and this, again, spoiler free, if you can. Do you think that you really needed to have watched Spider-Man No Way Home going into this one? Because my wife actually has not watched that yet. We just haven't gotten the chance to, and at least from our perspective, it didn't seem like she missed anything.
No, I don't think you do. I don't think
it's better to see Wanda. You almost need to see WandaVision for this one, but
I don't think you need to know about the Spider-Man. Like they cover it in one of the opening scenes. Like they're like, oh yeah, there was a Spider-Man thing that happened.
It was just an illusion, right? It's really not like it's not essential viewing.
Correct. Yeah. Like they
for the purpose of this movie, it's a better movie, I think. But
I would agree too. But WandaVision is the essential thing to watch. I mean, anything that has Wanda. So that's like starting with Age of Ultron, Civil War, WandaVision, the Infinity War and Endgame movies. Those are all essential viewing, I think. And then Doctor Strange, he's also in Infinity War and Endgame, but watching his solo movie, I think, would also benefit people. But outside of that, like, I don't know, like there are allusions to other movies in there, but it's not like you're going to really be completely lost like you would if you didn't watch WandaVision.
Sure. So overall, you're saying positive, even with kind of the flaws.
Yeah. So I keep an updated MCU ranking on my phone and on first viewing. And this changes all the time, by the way. Like every time I do an MCU rewatch, I do a little bit of shuffle. Right now, I have. I mean, and this is also
don't do the whole list. We don't have time for that.
No. I think there's 33 movies. If my 33 projects, including the streaming shows.
Yes. Okay.
I have it at number 17, so right in the middle.
Okay.
I have it below Thor Ragnarok and above Captain Marvel.
I almost feel like and I'm not going to give you a list because I don't have one right now. It's certainly not one with all the projects, but I would honestly put this one kind of a little lower. I didn't love it. And maybe part of that is I'm just not a horror guy. So
there were a lot of horror elements.
It is very horror, yeah. And like it's not like I'm sitting there scared out of my wits or anything. It's just I'm just not.
They had some jump scares, make no mistake. And also, one thing that I will say that I've seen a lot of people talking about this. If you're bringing your kid to this movie, maybe exercise a little bit of caution and gauge how they handle like some disturbing imagery, especially like people dying and stuff, but also jump scares and like kind of grotesque imagery.
Brian, I got to tell you, when I went to see this, and this doesn't bother me like it doesn't bother my wife like it bothers me, but there were two different groups they couldn't have been together. They were in different parts of the theater that brought toddlers.
Oh no!
To see this movie. Now, are these toddlers actually even understanding what they're watching? Maybe not, but they were crying like they didn't want to be there, probably because they shouldn't have been brought there.
Yeah.
I'm a parent, right? I talked about this before. I have young kids. My kids are 6 and 4.5. And I wouldn't even think to bring them at any point in their life up to this point because, one, it's not for them. They're not interested in it. They shouldn't be interested in it. It doesn't make any sense. And number two, all they're going to be able to do is ruin the experience for either me or someone else.
100%.
If you are so determined to see this movie, and you can't get a sitter, I'm sorry. You have to stay home. That's really how it should be. That's how we did it. And look, I'm not saying like my way of doing it is absolutely the right way to do it all the time, but realistically, you got to think you have to think about other people. Seriously, like, why are you doing this? You're probably not paying for their ticket. They're so little that you probably don't even have to pay for their ticket. And if you did,
it's a very cheap one.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. There's no cheap ticket.
Have you ever left a movie and gotten a refund?
I think I did it once.
I don't remember which one.
I
forget what the movie was, but I remember I got in there, and this is like before movie theaters with assigned seats really existed.
Yeah.
And I got in there, and it was sold out completely. And I sat down in the front seat, like literal front seat, and I was like looking straight up, And I remember being like, this is going to be the worst experience of my life. So I left, and I remember I bought nachos, and they would refund the ticket, but they wouldn't refund the nachos.
Oh, I mean, that's food.
I understand, but at the same time, I was like, dude, I bought this so I could watch a movie with it, and now I can't watch the movie without like getting sick. Can I please have the money back for the nachos? And no, we're not going to refund the nachos.
So, but you know, to close this out, I will say, just because, you know, I'll give you my 2 cents on it again. I'm not really I didn't really love it. It was fine. Like, I'm not sitting there saying I didn't like it. It's definitely not a weak movie. It's just, for me, my personal enjoyment of it. I didn't resonate. It didn't resonate as much with me. So it was fine. And honestly, I really like the first Doctor Strange movie. So it's really not that. And it kind of surprises me because I'm not a huge fantasy guy necessarily. Maybe that's really what it is here, is that generally speaking, I'm just not a fantasy guy. So the fact that they're kind of moving into that direction, it's not necessarily my favorite approach. So I don't know, maybe I'm just predisposed not to like it, but I was interested to see it. And I would say it probably it dipped below my expectations for it, but not by much.
Yeah, I had very high hopes for this movie, and it fell fairly well short of that. But I wouldn't say like I disliked the movie. It's just I want to see it again, see what else I picked up on. And you know, I referenced that there are some death scenes with some characters. I mean, I'm not going to say like anything in particular, but there's one thing that really stuck with me that has been replaying in my head almost hauntingly. So just exercise caution.
When we're done recording, I'm going to ask you what that is exactly.
I'm just saying, exercise caution if you bring the kids.
Sure. Yeah. Please don't bring the kids that are that young. No, seriously, just don't do it. But you know, I want to get to fighting because we're kind of getting up later in kind of the time that you and I have allotted to be able to do this show, right? So let's switch over to fights. We just had over the weekend UFC Vegas 54. Actually, I put the number here on the wrong, but yeah, UFC Vegas 54. Fight night, not necessarily one that we were looking at going in as like the you know, can't miss it level of fight night even, but I think you were interested in it. You liked the main event. You were interested in the undercard. I think I was a little below you, but still honestly on the plus side. I thought it was at least average to solid fight night that you could realistically expect. What's your main takeaway though from the headlining fight with Jan Blachowicz getting the win over Alexander Rakic, which of course was an injury TKO, because Rakic essentially, it looks like he blew out some of the ligaments in his knee, in his right knee. And I thought it was also like after he was taking a bunch of kicks from Blachowicz that were really kind of chewing up his other leg, his lead left leg. So I thought it at least had a role to play in that. He's saying that there was like maybe an injury that happened in camp as well. So there's probably that. But what is your takeaway from that particular fight?
It's hard to take away from an injury stoppage, you know, but like we had basically 2.5 rounds to go off of almost, and I think that Blachowicz still looks like a contender. I think that he in a very shallow, very in disarray division right now, where you know Glover Teixeira is the champion and Yuri Prohaska is going to fight him next month. I think that Blachowicz still has a fighting shot at getting back to the title, you know, like one more win, he's there. I would think, like if he takes out one more ranked guy, like he's gonna be right there, like ready to challenge for the title again.
I would actually say that I think he's probably done enough to be able to get that next title shot, and the reason being that there isn't necessarily a clear cut other alternative. I mean, you have kind of this rising contender in Jamal Hill, but he's not that far removed from a submission loss and a very clear loss of a fight to Paul Craig, who I don't know that necessarily people are saying he's a fight away from a title shot. He's got a fight lined up against, oh my gosh, who is it again? I'm trying to remember. But while I think of that, there's also Magomed Ankalaev. He's got a fight coming up against, I believe it is Anthony Smith. That one is in the summer. So yeah, I mean, there's some fights there, but I think none of them is going to produce a winner that everyone's clamoring for. So unless the UFC has some real plans that they're looking for, or maybe this eye injury that, or like this cut under the eye that Blachowicz suffered in this fight in particular, saying it might need surgery, that's something that could complicate it. But you know, the title fight that we have next week or next month is Prohaska and Teixeira. That offers some time for recovery from something like that. But I would think that they could probably sell a rematch with Blachowicz and Glover Teixeira, because they're both very popular. They're well-liked fighters. And they're really, I don't think it's disarray necessarily, but it's just that there's no clear-cut other guy who's waiting in line like we have in some other divisions.
And it's really the only division right now that doesn't just have like a well-established champion, like in the men's division anyway. Like, I mean, unless you count Charles Oliveira. I count Charles Oliveira as the champion. Let's be real.
Oh, I think we're way past that. Come on.
I mean, Aljamain Sterling's the closest thing that we have is not a well-established champion.
We know who's the champion. It doesn't matter who has the belt. He's the champion.
I think
the champion has a name, and it is Charles Oliveira, as he likes to say.
That's what he says.
Yeah.
I think that if Yuri wins, Jan Blachowicz has a better shot at getting to the belt next.
Just because it's a fresh matchup.
Yeah.
I get you. But
that would be a banger of a fight.
Be selling it, though, because people like Blachowicz. They like to share. I said this on social media that I think if they were to promote that fight, they should get rid of like all the pre-fight shows they do that's like building up this intensity of the rematch. No. I don't want to see any of that. I don't want any of that to happen. What I want is they want to get these two together at a barbecue. You're going to get Teixeira. You're going to get Jan Blachowicz, and they're just going to sit there and they're going to chat and have a good time and laugh. And I just want to watch them interact.
They basically did that ahead of time with the embedded, where like Jan came in and just like saying hello to Glover and just being like, "Hey, I brought you some Polish beer."
But I want even more of that. That's the thing. That's like, just like this is the appetizer. I want the whole thing.
I want them to drink the Polish beer together.
I want them to chill. I want them to just talk about life. How things have been, how they've gotten to this point, laugh, have burgers, have those beers. I think they would produce some amazing fun content. And that I would actually watch. I don't watch much of the embedded stuff and that kind of thing. Like sometimes out of necessity for work. Yeah. But like realistically, those aren't for media. That's for trying to get you to want to watch the show. You being a fight fan, Brian.
By the way, I'm scrolling through the UFC like rankings and everything. You know, they have the champions at the top and
sure.
Looking at all these established names on the men's side. And then you get down to the women's side, and we have Carla Esparza as the strawweight champion and Juliana Pena as the bantamweight champion. It's like, wow, like talk about a tale of like kind of two sides of the coin. Whereas like one, like it almost feels like it's like trippy to see them in the championship spots, like instead of Nunes or Namajunas or
it is wild because we got so used to saying the same names for many years. But hey, you know what? They both earned their keep there. They got where they did, and realistically, look, you don't just like how Carla Esparza won the belt. But would you have been happy if Rose won the belt in the way she did? I mean, that was a terrible fight. We don't need to go into that anymore.
I will say it's comforting to see Valentina Shevchenko still there, though.
Of course, there's kind of a familiarity for you. Does that make it better?
It's nostalgic almost.
So what about the rest of the card, though? Like, I mean, you don't have to go. I don't want to go deep into each matchup necessarily, but I just want to know, like, did the rest of the card kind of? Here's a base level for you. The rest of this fight card. Was it worth your time to have watched this or to, let's say, play like a good game or something like that?
I really enjoyed the Michael Johnson, Alan Patrick fight.
Okay.
I really liked Manuel Torres and Frank Camacho. That was a banger.
It was going to be, yeah.
Yeah. And then
for as long as it lasted.
Davey Grant and Louis Smolka. That was fun too.
Sure.
So like those are all fights I would recommend. And honestly,
did it but was the entire experience worth your time? That's kind of what I'm really getting at here.
I didn't watch the early prelims.
Okay.
So I missed Petrovsky, Maximov. I missed Tyra Candelario. I missed Janjiroba versus Hill, which I hated that I missed that because I turned it on right when Michael Johnson was fighting.
It's not the most interesting fight. There's really not much to go back to other than the fact that Janjiroba was able to impose her game on the ground very well. And that's not to say it was necessarily a boring fight, but like 30-27 all across the board, that pretty much tells you everything about that fight. I would say watch the other two because you do like Tyra.
Yeah. And
who banked the win.
Also, the co-main was fun.
Yes, absolutely. So
again, as long as it lasted.
So worth your time, more or less. We're saying,
think so.
Right?
I think it's worth your time, and I think that honestly, Amanda Ribas pulled a fun fight out of Ketlen Vieira, which I didn't think was possible.
Yeah,
like Ketlen Vieira
ended up being the fight of the night. I don't know that it was necessarily better than Smolka and Davey Grant. I thought that really was
I didn't see the bonuses
fight.
Actually.
So yeah, that was the fight of the night. Ryan Spann got a performance of the night bonus, rightfully so, as Iwan Cutelaba was charging it like a bull and being very Cutelaba-y.
Cutelaba.
Kutelabi, yeah.
But yeah, I think that it was worth your time. I think that was overall a good fight night, and some great performances and some people who, in a couple fights, might be finding a number by their name if they win those fights.
I think so, but yeah, I was on the whole, like, coming out of this though, there's very little that actually impacted the rest of the division, other than kind of the title fight, or the title fight, the headlining fight here, and then I mean, Chookagian obviously got a win, and we saw an impressive showing in her flyweight debut for the UFC as in Amanda Ribas, but. I mean, Chookagian's not next for the flyweight shot. She can want it, but like, she's really, no one's clamoring for her to get that rematch that she wants. She said
she said she wanted the title fight, or she'll just take on whoever she needs to fight to get to the title fight
Which
again.
Is to say she's going to do that.
Yeah,
that's what's going to happen. She could say she wants it, but she's just not going to get it yet. She's going to have to clean out everyone else pretty much, I think. I
think that Ryan Spann made some waves in light heavyweight. Again, we were just talking about how this division doesn't really have the deepest contender pool. I think that like an impressive win over Iwan Cutelaba, I think that is going to get him closer and closer. It moves him up the ladder. Yeah, and that's really all you can do in a division like light heavyweight at this point.
Sure. I understand. But we're still not talking about several fights away, I think, before he's really there. He would have to go on a real run. And
I think several fights away from contendership. I think he's going
to no, he's an interesting fighter. Like, when he's on the board, I mean, he produces
already 13. Fights.
Excuse me?
Span's already 13.
He's in the rankings, but that's what I'm saying. He's not really like when we're talking about kind of the grander scheme. We're talking about how like the title fights and that kind of thing, or title shots and title picture. He's still far flung, I think, from that.
Do we give Johnny Walker to Ryan Spann, or would that just be mean?
I don't like that one. I think Johnny Walker really needs to take a step back in competition.
Well, I mean, that's 12 versus 13.
I'm not saying you protect the guy, but I think we've seen that he's not doing that well in the rankings, like against ranked fighters. He needs to at least get somebody at the very low end. And I think Spann should move up past Johnny Walker. I think Johnny Walker's overranked. And I think
Ozdemir then? Ozdemir at 9?
No.
I think I was right when I said it was in disarray. Honestly.
I agree to disagree, I suppose. But, let's look ahead, though, too, because there is, again, UFC Vegas 250, UFC Vegas 55 coming up this weekend, because we just have so many of these UFC Vegas shows that they're just.
All right, let's see what we got.
It is, it's headlined by Holly Holm and Ketlen Vieira at 135 pounds on the women's side. Why don't you give me another rating of the Fight Night main event rating, 1 to 10 on your interest level, just like we did last week.
This is on the lower end, probably a 4 or a 5.
That's the lower end. Now remember, we're talking middle ground is a 5. It's not like game reviews where a 5 is still terrible.
Fine, we'll do a 4. We'll do 4.
Okay.
I'm interested in the fact that Holly Holm is a name, and Ketlen Vieira is kind of perennially in the discussion for a title fight. Like, and if she beats Holly Holm, I think they might give her it after.
There are title implications here. That's the thing. You're right. I do think there are title implications here that realistically, whoever wins this one can make a very strong argument for being the next title fight after it gets sorted out between Amanda Nunes and Juliana Pena, who are now, of course, coaching on The Ultimate Fighter, which I am not watching. Do you watch The Ultimate Fighter anymore?
No.
Yeah. Why would you? It's not interesting. It's not even the best place to watch prospects in the sport. It's not anymore. So
I think we should change our scale here for our rate. Instead of 1 to 10, because there are connotations there, I think we just do a letter grade.
Oh man, that gets more complicated.
But that's easier to track, right?
I don't know. I think numbers are simple enough, man.
I'm gonna give this main event a C. I'll give it a C. Solid C.
All right. I guess that's fair. I'm sticking. I like my numbers, sir. I'm gonna give you both, but
nothing less confusing than two people doing two different rating scales.
You know what we should do? We should make sure that we also add one that's in like a coded language that no one understands.
We'll do us. Morse code.
Yes, indeed.
But what else do you see on this?
It's a middle of the pack is rated. I think that's probably fair to say.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be the most interesting fight either. I think when you get Holly Holm, sometimes they're bangers that end up with like a big finish, but a lot of the time they end up kind of being these like labored fights, and I don't even know that's always her. And I think probably we could end up seeing that in the matchup here of styles. I have worries about it being stylistically not the most interesting of fights.
I'm seeing that for a lot of these fights on this card, honestly.
Yeah, it's not necessarily shaping up to be.
There's a couple that I'm interested in.
Yeah, I mean, you can name check them real quick, but it's definitely not looking to be a can't miss type of fight night, right?
Eric Anders versus Jun Young Park, that could be fun. Polyana Viana versus Tabitha Ricci, that could be fun.
Baby Shark, yeah.
I will say the co-main is a banger.
Oh yeah, Santiago Ponzinibbio and Michel Pereira. I like that one very much. That is, for me, that's actually the most interesting fight on this card.
Me too. Yeah,
I would say Jailton Almeida against Parker Porter is actually interesting. Not more for Almeida because he's an interesting. He's a light heavyweight. He's just taking this fight kind of a short notice ish, a change of opponents. So he took this fight against Parker Porter at heavyweight.
What do you think about Jonathan Martinez versus Vince Morales?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's fights here. It's not that it's garbage. They didn't put garbage out there. Chase Hooper against Felipe Colares, I think that has the potential to be a very good ground based battle, and not in a sort of grindy way. I think it could make some very interesting scrambles and actual jiu-jitsu, exchanges and that kind of thing. It could be very interesting down there. But on the whole, I mean, I don't necessarily love the totality of what's being presented here from a fight night perspective. Is it the worst out there? No, I think the bar has been set very low now. So I think we know what we're saying when we're looking at like these, oh man, this is the worst kind of thing. I'm putting the undercard necessarily in terms of my level of interest at, what are we doing? Numbers, letters,
take your pick. I'll follow your suit.
I think numbers is easier, man. I'm going to put this as like a 3.
Okay. Yeah. I'll put it as, probably a 3 as well. That co-main is really the anchor for this.
I think so.
This was supposed to be the fight card that we were going to get Gustafsson versus Rothwell, which I don't know how interested in that fight I would have been, but like that would have added some names.
It's definitely better than it would have been. And now Ben Rothwell, he's left the UFC. He's fighting bare knuckle. He seems happy about it, but
I hope he's getting paid because
it sounds like he is.
Like he was underappreciated in the UFC.
Yeah, I think from everything that's being presented, it sounds like he's getting more money. So good for him.
Yeah,
get that paper.
Big Ben Rothwell fan.
Okay, all right. And I mean, I guess is the one can't miss fight, is that Pereira and Santiago Ponzinibbio? I think that's fair. I think that really is one that, like, if you're not even going to carve out too much time for this one, like that's one that, tune in for that one. I'm not sure exactly what time of the evening that'll be, but later in the card for sure.
I mean, I'm going to keep an eye on Viana versus Ricci. But yeah, other than that, like if I got nothing better to do on a Saturday night, I might turn this on. And if I do have something better to do, then maybe I'll watch some replays.
I would say, you could kind of, because it's the co-main event here, it's probably, I think it's a 6-fight main card, just about 2 hours after the, listed main card start time. That's when you probably could be able to tune in and look to watch Pereira and Ponzinibbio. So there's a good estimate for you if you're not really sure what to do.
Yeah, so that might end up being what I do, but we'll see.
Before we go, Brian, because this is UFC is obviously the market leader and everything like that, but Bellator is still doing its thing, right? We didn't even really touch upon Bellator last week, but there was an event. They were in London. It was headlined by what ended up being a very terrible and boring and grindy interim welterweight title fight between Logan Storley and Michael Venom Page. I think Bellator, it can't be a secret that they want MVP to win a belt, and it just didn't happen this time. But I can tell you, I don't think you watched it, but it was really just a terrible fight that really very little happened. You had Page trying to get some strikes in, but he just couldn't stop the wrestling, and nothing really happened off of either one. But the question I have for you, it's not about that fight in particular or that card even, but just you, I know, are not necessarily a regular Bellator watcher or subscriber of Showtime, so you can be able to watch Bellator. The question I have, you, Brian, as a fight fan, what would it take for you to deem it worthy to have Showtime regularly so that you can watch Bellator, not just for other stuff, but for Bellator itself? What would it take for you to get Bellator to that point for you?
They'd have to have some good fights. Like all of their main events recently, if they don't finish quickly, which, like AJ McKee, Pitbull, the first fight.
That was July.
That was a good fight, but it ended very quickly. All of their fights that last any amount of time in the main event, anyway, all their main event fights that last any amount of time have sucked lately. Like,
yeah,
it's just been
that's fair.
boring. And it's like, and I hate when people say fights are boring, because like usually it's because they don't understand the intricacies of the grappling that's happening, or usually it's because they don't understand like the counter striking measures and everything. But no, a lot of these fights have just not been entertaining fights. And it's like, if I'm going to carve out extra time on top of the 6 to 7 hours that the UFC requires of me almost every damn week, it's got to be just banger after banger. Like it's got to be a name that I recognize, which, you know, Bellator does have a few.
They do. I mean, they had Machida on there, who obviously we all know very well, but he's getting long in the tooth.
Yeah. And
he lost by knockout in this one too.
Yeah, it's a shame to see people like that take those types of L's. But like, yeah, I was excited for Storley MVP, but now hearing what it is, it's like, oh well, I shouldn't have been, because it just sounds like the fight sucked.
It wasn't as bad as Esparza and Namajunas that we had last week, but
at least they were touching each other.
I mean, yeah, it wasn't. It's minimally better. It's like on a base, like if you're gonna say the scale is a 1 to 10, and you're gonna put Namajunas Esparza 2 as the like actual like 1.0. This is probably like a 1.5. So it's really not much more.
I would watch Bellator if it was on a subscription that I already had. If they went back to Paramount Plus, if they went to ESPN Plus, which I know they're not going to do because ESPN Plus already has the rights to 2 major MMA promotions.
Yeah, I don't think
if Bellator went to a subscription service, say Netflix, Amazon Prime, any of them sign Bellator for like whatever their next broadcast contract is up, I'll watch Bellator. But I'm not going to go out of my way to get a subscription service that I wouldn't otherwise have. The reason I had Showtime for the period that I did is because I was watching the new season of Dexter. And then I heard Yellow Jackets was really great. So I watched Yellow Jackets. And then I was like, all right, do I really want to watch a 6-season show in billions? I've heard it's great, but like I have so many other shows that I need to watch. So I just canceled my Showtime subscription. I let the promotion that they gave me, where it was like $3 a month or whatever, I let that run its course and like watch Bellator whenever it was on. But I'm not going to go out of my way. What is it? $10 a month, $12 a month for Showtime? It's like, no, I have enough subscription services. I'm dropping like more money than I ever would have if I just was paying for cable, like back in the day. That was supposed to be the alleviation of the cable bill, was you're just going to get like the subscription services. No, now I'm paying more for subscription services. And it's good.
I think the idea is you can kind of do a la carte now, right?
Exactly. That's why I'm canceling Showtime.
Yeah, there you go.
Because Showtime, while there are some very good shows, like I love Californication, I love Dexter, Yellow Jackets was phenomenal. I'll renew when Yellow Jackets season 2 comes out, but there's nothing else on there that I want to watch really.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, like Bellator, sorry. Like if you were on a subscription service that I was otherwise engaging with, I'd probably watch you, but I'm not going to drop more money for just Bellator when they don't have the consistent schedule that the UFC has. They don't have the consistent talent the UFC has. They don't have the consistent excitement the UFC has. And they're wanting, I mean, again, Showtime comes with a lot more than just Bellator, but for my purposes, they're wanting just as much money as the UFC is wanting, minus the pay-per-views.
I think the worst thing about the current state of Bellator right now is the fact that these main events are just not living up to any sort of interest level when you actually sit down and watch them. The rest of the cards, honestly, they're producing some very interesting fights, some good finishes. There's some prospects on there who are actually very interesting. They've done a better job. It's not all the way there, but they've done a better job of improving the quality of their preliminary schedule. There was a time where Bellator prelims it was basically just like local fighters. They would, local promotions would essentially put their fighters on there to fill it out. They're not doing that anymore. They've at least kind of filled it out with real Bellator fighters and prospects and tried to build it that way. I appreciate that. And I think it's led to better results, but you got to put a fight together as the headliner that's not just, interesting from either a name value or a title fight or anything. They really need fights at the top that are going to have people coming away from Bellator saying, hey, that was a good show. It left us feeling good. So we watched enough of these UFC events where there's like really good finishes and that kind of thing. And then you get to the the headliner, we'll say, it's probably Fight Night we're talking. And it just it doesn't deliver. It's a slog. I'm thinking like Thiago Santos against who we talked about before, Johnny Walker, that kind of thing. These fights, they leave a bad taste in your mouth. And I think that unfortunately is what happens with Bellator, which Bellator can't really afford it the same way UFC can. And the UFC, we understand that these fight nights are going to be hit or miss, but when we get to the monthly pay-per-view, we're at least getting like a bevy of fights that really ought to deliver most of the time. Not always, but most of the time they're really building these cards out to be something that's like, yeah, at least they're trying to earn your $75 that got, which is a lot of money, but it's at least they're getting there. And I think they do a better job of it. Bellator, if they're not going to put on an interesting fight, man, they're going to leave a lot of bad tastes and it's going to hurt the product.
Like Bellator needs to have, especially main event fights, that people leave and they say, I've got to tell my friend about that. I got to tell my family member about that. The last time that happened for me, when of the Bellator cards I watched, was Pitbull McKee 1.
It's been a while since that one, obviously.
That's the last time that a main event card happened. And I was like, our main event fight happened at Bellator. And I was like, damn, I've got to tell somebody about that fight because that was so good. And like, meanwhile, every pay-per-view, I call my dad afterwards and let him know like all the stuff that happened. And like, oh my God, Justin Gaethje went in and he almost knocked Charles Oliveira out. And then Charles Oliveira came back and submitted him. And it was crazy. Like, that's the type of excitement Bellator needs to invoke. And they just haven't in their main event fights. Like, sure, like there's some cool knockouts on the undercard, but the main events are just not doing it for them. And they need that. They need that street team, for lack of a better word. They need that grassroots movement of fans who watch these fights and then they go and they evangelize the brand of Bellator. And they've just not inspired that.
I like the idea, by the way, of you calling up your dad and talking about the fights, because it in my mind is very adorable. I don't think my dad cares about fights and that kind of thing. But
he'll watch ESPN fights. Like if it's on ESPN or ESPN2, I'll be like, hey, by the way, like you'll be able to watch like 4 fights on the prelims of this pay-per-view tomorrow night. And then he'll watch those fights and like he'll text me about them, like, oh wow, so-and-so really did it. Like that was a really great fight. And then oh my God, I had him watch PFL when it was Pettis and Kayla Harrison at the top. And then like I was like, oh yeah, you're gonna see either like one of the biggest upsets of all time with Kayla Harrison, or you're gonna see her blow through this girl. And then we got neither, because it was a very boring Kayla Harrison fight. And I was like, well, sorry, Dad.
Sorry, Dad. I've said that before, but I think we've got a show here, man. I think we can wrap it up. If you like what you heard, dear listener, be sure to subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening to my melodic tones right now. And while you're at it, would you kindly follow us on social media at Brian Pichet for Brian, at Scott_Fontana for myself on Twitter and Instagram.
Thank you so much for listening. If you want to reach us with questions, feedback, topics, anything else you're hyped about, hit us up at groundandpwnedpod@gmail.com or at groundandpwned on Twitter. Until next time, enjoy the fights, enjoy the games, and we will talk to you next week.